here. So quadratic formula. What we're dealing with here. Folks, earbuds out of your ears, please. Okay, please. Thank you. All right. Quadratic formula. Quadratics, ax squared plus bx plus c. We've seen that before. Okay. Same kind of equation. Just like when we were doing solving by factoring. It's got to be equal to 0 first before we start. Okay. So this is different than solving by square roots. When you solve by square roots, you know, the middle piece wasn't there and you had to get the squared part by itself. This is going to be problems that are like they look like ones that we did with the X method for factoring. Problem is, not every problem will factor. We ran into that when we were learning about factoring, that there were some that were called prime that wouldn't factor. So when you're dealing with quadratic formula, the first step is to make sure that it, get it equal to 0. Make sure you do that first. And then notice that it's in descending order, just like it would be if you were going to factor it. Okay, so none of that is any different there. Okay, the quadratic formula, and this is what you need to memorize: quadratic formula. X equals negative b plus or minus radical or square root, whichever one you want to call it, same thing. B squared minus 4a times c over 2 times a. So it's using the a, b, and the c from the quadratic equation that they give you, and you're plugging in things there. Notice we have this negative b, and then on the bottom we got that 2a. Where have we seen that before? Axis of symmetry. That's related to this. It's exactly, connected to that. All right. Now, memorizing things is not something I'm incredibly great at, especially formulas and things. Now, memorizing lyrics to songs, not hard. That's easy to do, right? You guys can do that pretty well. So one of the things that I've learned over the years is if you can put it to a tune that you know or a beat that you can drop, you can memorize this. Okay, so I do a very simple one because it's a melody that everybody knows. Okay, row, row, row your boat. Y'all remember that little tune? Row, row, row your boat gently down the stream. That melody is really easy to sing this song to. Okay, so we're going to sing the quadratic formula to that melody. Okay, and I'm going to sing it a couple of times for you with my wonderful voice that I have, and then I would like for you to sing with me, and this will help you memorize it. And that way you're not having to spend time just writing. Because that's the only other way I know how to memorize things is just write it over and over. And that's boring. Okay, so this is just at least a little bit better way. Okay, so the way it goes is you're going to sing the melody to row, row, row your boat, but you're going to sing the formula, x equals negative b plus or minus. And I'm going to say the word radical because it fits better in the melody than square root does. Okay, and then divided by 2a. So that's going to be the lyrics to it is the formula. Okay. So the way it goes is x equals negative b plus or minus radical b squared minus 4ac divided by 2a. See? It's got a nice, it rings to it. It makes it easy to memorize. So I'm going to sing it again. X equals negative b plus or minus radical b squared minus 4ac divided by 2a. X equals negative b plus or minus radical b squared minus 4ac divided by 2a. All right, let's get the choir going. I was raised in church. I was raised in church, and we had a choir, and I learned to sing in the choir. Mr. Killingsworth was one of the guys who taught me how to sing in the choir. And he's so much taller than me. You can ask him about this story. I used to stand on hymnals so that I could get up to his level because he was teaching me how to sing the parts. So I couldn't see because he was up here and I was way down here. So I used to stand on the books and the choir loft to learn to sing from him. So when you sing in a choir, you got to stand up. So y'all stand up. Oh. Let's have some fun. Just loosen up a little bit. I mean, it's algebra. I know it's not the funnest subject in the world. But this is at least something different from what we're doing. Come on, Fraser. Got it. Come on, dude. Oh, he joined us. Great. Thank you. All right, here we go. X equals negative b plus or minus radical b squared minus 4ac divided by 2a. X equals negative b plus or minus radical b squared minus 4ac divided by 2a. One more time. X equals negative b plus or minus radical b squared minus 4ac divided by 2a. The end. All right, good job, guys. All right. Quadratic formula. We got the formula. We're on the way to memorizing it. Okay. Part of that formula is this thing called a discriminant. D-I-S-C-R-I-M-I-N-A-N-T. Discriminant. The discriminant is the b squared minus 4ac part. It's the part underneath the radical. That's all you got. You got to remember that. Okay. So if you memorize the formula and I ask you what the discriminant is, all you got to tell me is what's underneath the square root, what's under the radical. That's what the b squared minus 4ac. Now, a discriminant discriminates. That's what it does. Okay. What it discriminates is what kind of answers we have. Okay. B squared minus 4ac. If it's greater than 0, what kind of number is greater than 0? Positive. So if it's positive, that's the most common thing we're going to see in Algebra 1. All right, so the most common thing we're going to see in Algebra 1 is the discriminant being a positive number. If it's positive, what that tells us is that we're going to have two real solutions. We'll get two answers. That's what that tells us. If b squared minus 4ac is positive. Discriminant, if b squared minus 4ac is equal to 0. So what the square root we're taking is 0, then that's going to tell us that we have one real solution. Okay, and these are things we've got to remember and apply here. Okay, we'll see this as we do examples. We'll talk about the discriminant every time and what it does for us. Okay, and then the last case that it could be, if it ain't positive and it ain't 0, what can it be? Negative. So if b squared minus 4ac is less than 0, it's negative. We have no real solutions. Now, when you get into Algebra 2, we will talk to you about the fact that it's actually two complex solutions. But in Algebra 1, all you got to know is there's no solution. That's what you got to know for Algebra 1. Okay? When you get into Algebra 2, we do some more stuff with that. Okay? So, you're going to see quadratics again when you take Algebra 2. So, keep that in mind. All right? So, that's why we're kind of being heavy on this. All right, so what we're going to do is we're going to take a quadratic equation and we're going to do the discriminant and the quadratic formula and solve the thing. Okay, so that's what our examples are going to be. I'm just going to give you a quadratic equation and you're supposed to solve it using the quadratic formula. That's what we're practicing. I know some of them will factor and you know how to factor, but I want us to practice quadratic formula today. Okay, so keep that in mind. All right, now let's get an example. So 3x squared plus 5x minus 8 is equal to 0. Okay, 3x squared plus 5x minus 8 is equal to 0. So here we have a Quadratic, we know it's quadratic because it's got an x squared in it. We know it needs to be in standard form in descending order because it has an x squared and a plain x. So we know we cannot do square roots to solve this one because it's got the x term in it. Now, is it equal to 0?
Yes.
Yes, so that means we're ready to start. Okay, the first thing that you want to do when you're trying to solve for using the quadratic formula, find the discriminant first so you know what you're even looking for. Or if you have to do the rest of the problem. Because if the discriminant's negative, there's no answer. You don't have to do anything, right? So we want to find that out first. We don't want to work it if there's not any answers to it, right? So we're going to find that discriminant. So first thing is the discriminant. Remember, that's the x equals negative b plus or minus radical. It's the b squared minus 4ac part, okay? So the discriminant is b squared minus 4 times a times c. We've just got to plug in the parts for that. Let's make our list. What's a? What's b? What's c? B is 5. What's a? 3. And c is negative 8. Forget that sign that goes with that, okay? So we're going to plug these things in to the formula for the discriminant. So parentheses 5 squared minus 4 times 3 times negative 8. Okay? And we're just working that out. What's 5 squared? 5 times 5 is 25. And then we're saying negative 4 times 3 times negative 8. So that's going to be negative 12 times negative 8. It's 12 times 8. Almost. 96. So because it was negative times a negative, it turned to a plus right there. Right? We all remember those rules. Now we just add these together. What's 25 plus 96? 121. What kind of number is that? It's positive. So that means we're going to find how many answers? 2. If the discriminant is positive, this tells us that there are 2 real solutions. That's what that tells us. There are problems on the EOC that will just ask you that. How many solutions are there to this problem? And all you've got to do is do the b squared minus 4ac, and you're done. Okay? There will be problems that will ask you that. ACT, I've seen ACT problems, but that's all you had to do. And if you remembered something from Algebra 1, you get a problem right on ACT. Okay? Now, let's take that and actually do the quadratic formula for that. So, x equals negative b plus or minus radical b squared minus 4ac divided by 2a. All right, so we've got it written out there. I'm going to plug in the stuff that I need, okay? I know that negative b means you do what to what b is positive 5, so negative b would be negative 5. Opposite of that. Here's the great thing about doing the discriminant first. I don't have to plug back in all this stuff underneath that square root. I already worked that out. What number is b squared minus 4ac? 121. So that's what I'm going to put underneath the square root. And then on the bottom of it, I got 2 times a. A was 3, so that's 2 times 3. And that's going to turn into a 6. So I'm going to write that negative 5 plus or minus, and I think I'm going to do something with that 121. All right. Now, what can we do with square roots? Simplify them. We already know how to do that. Do we know the square root of 121? Not 12. Close. Say it again, Logan. 11. The square root of 121 is 11. Okay? So instead of writing square root of 121, I'm going to write 11 right there. Okay. Now I have 2 problems to work out. I have x equals negative 5 plus 11 divided by 6, and I have negative 5 minus 11 divided by 6. All I've got to do is work those two out. I'm going to have the two answers I already knew what I was going to find. Okay? Negative 5 plus 11 is 6. 6 divided by 6 is 1. All right, one of our answers is 1. Negative 5 minus 11 is negative 16 over 6. Does that go evenly? No, but it will reduce, right? Both of them are divisible by, well, don't think about factor trees because we're just reducing a fraction here. 16 and 6 are both divisible by what number? 2. So 16 divided by 2, negative 8. 6 divided by 2, 3. Do 8 and 3 have anything else in common? No. So we're going to leave it as that fraction. Reduce fractions as far as they'll go, but we're going to leave them like that. We've solved our first equation using quadratic formula. Okay. Is it short? No. But here we are. We're 12 days away from the end of course test. Shouldn't we be doing the hardest thing we've done? Yeah, because it's the end of the class. I mean, you're taking everything we've done so far and putting it into use in one kind of problem. Let's look at another example. Example B. 2x squared minus x is equal to 7. What's the first thing I got to do? Not equal to 0, so I need to get it equal to 0. So what do I need to do first? Well, look at the left side. How many pieces are over there? 2. The right side's only got 1. So I think it'd be easier to move that 7, right? Be quicker to move one box than it is to move 2 boxes, right? So how do I move that 7? If I subtract it, because it's a positive 7, the only way to get rid of a positive 7 is subtract 7. 7 minus 7 is 0. And then over here, I've got 2x squared minus x minus 7. Now I have everything on one side and 0 on the other side. That allows me to look at doing quadratic formula. Okay? What's A, B, and C for this one? 2, negative 1, negative 7. Don't forget the signs that go with them. Because if you don't have those signs there, you will mess up your formula. And you may put all the numbers in there in the right spot, but if the signs are not the right ones, then it's going to cause problems. Okay. So be careful of that. All right. So again, the first thing that we're going to do is find the discriminant. Okay. So b squared minus 4ac. So negative 1 squared minus 4 times 2 times negative 7. So we're just taking the discriminant, b squared minus 4ac. B is negative 1, so that's what I put there. 4 times a is 2, c is negative 7. So that's, I'm just plugging those things in. Now, what happens when you square negative 1? It becomes positive 1. That's one of the most common mistakes with this is, folks, when you square a negative number, it becomes positive. A lot of folks will just type that into the calculator. They'll say negative 1 squared. And the calculator gives them back negative 1. And that's what my calculator gave me, so it's got to be right. But that's not right. Your calculator reads that as you going negative and then 1 squared, like separately. That's how the calculator reads that. Square the 1 and then make it negative. So when you're typing, if you're going to type that into the calculator to do, you better use parentheses. Parentheses, negative 1. Close the parentheses, squared. Then we get the positive back. Or you could just think with your brain and know that anytime you square any number, you get a positive back. Always. Always, always, always. Okay? So that's positive 1. We got negative 4 times 2 is negative 8 times negative 7 would be positive 56. So our discriminant is 57. We know because it's a positive 57 that we have how many solutions? 2 real solutions. That's what that tells us. Okay? Let's find those using the quadratic formula. X equals negative b plus or minus equal b squared minus 4ac divided by 2a. All right? If you write it as many times as I do today, you won't even have to worry about memorizing it. I'm going to write it on every problem. We're not doing a ton of examples today. I've got, 6, I think, total. And, but they all take a little longer, so that's why we don't do as many of them, okay? Now, let's plug in stuff we know. We know b is negative 1, so negative b would be positive 1. We know the discriminant, part underneath the square root, is 57, so we're going to put that there. And then 2 times 2 on the bottom. Now, this one's a little different because we've got a 57 under there. Does 57 have a nice square root? No. 64 does, 49 does, neither, 57 is not either of those, and there's not any square numbers between that. So then we look at it and say, okay, can I break down 57 and simplify that square root? So I would try to do a factor tree for 57. Well, I know 3 goes into it. 1 or 2 left over, 19 times. But 19's prime. So that doesn't break down any further. So does that simplify any? No. Turns out that makes this problem a little easier because that means I can't work it out to get nice numbers. I'm going to get 2 answers. I'm going to get x equals 1 plus the square root of 57 over, what's 2 times 2? 4. And then I'm going to get 1 minus the square root of 57 over 4. Whoops. Draw a box around something. And we're going to leave our answers like that. Okay. Not bad. Not bad. Again, we're still always going to try to simplify that square root. If it simplifies, then split it apart and try to make answers happen. If it doesn't simplify, then you're going to still split it apart, but we're going to have 2 answers that look like this. Okay? Inside of there, then if we find the discriminant is negative there, we're not even going to do that part. We're just going to say no solution. Because remember, when the discriminant is negative, then there are no real solutions. Okay? Now in Algebra 2, we'll teach you how to do there are some other things that we can do that make up the complex solutions. But Algebra 1, we don't have to worry about that. Okay? There's enough going on for us right now to have to try to do that. Okay, so let's try another one. Let's say we had 4x squared is equal to 7x plus 2. It doesn't equal 0, so we've got to make it equal 0. So what can we do? We can move the 2. That would work. We could also move what? We would also have to move what? The 7x. So that works fine. And I'm not opposed to doing that. Is there a shorter way to get it equal to 0? I can move the 4x squared and also get that. But what does that introduce into the problem? Some negatives out of there. So that makes it a little tougher to do sometimes. So I'm not opposed to either way. Let's go ahead and move the 4, though, so that we can see one happening with a negative a value. Because it gets you the same answer no matter which way you do it. You can't screw it up as long as you get it equal to 0 legally, and you put the things in the right order. So I'm going to go ahead and do this one with moving the 4x squared. one, to give you the practice of doing that with a negative in there, but also because, you know, if you're given one with a negative in front of there, you don't have to move it. And I don't want you to have to do extra steps on a process that's already pretty long, right? We start adding extra steps in there, more places we can make mistakes. It's more places that we've got to do extra work. And we don't like doing extra work. So most don't like doing initial work, let alone extra work. Okay. So discriminant, let's find it first. Remember that's b squared minus 4ac. What's a, b, and c for this problem? -4, 7, and 2. Okay. So 7 squared minus 4 times -4 times 2. 49 plus 16 times 2 is 32. What's 49 plus 32? Well, 9 plus 2 is 11. 40 plus 30 is 70. What's 70 plus 11? 81. A lot of times it's easier to do that way. Add the ones up and then make the others powers or multiples of 10. And so 81s are discriminant. So that tells us we have how many solutions? 2 real solutions. We know that from the fact that the discriminant is positive. So let's do the work to find those 2 solutions. Again, that's the most common thing you're going to have when you do practice today. There's not going to be very many of them that have no solution. Okay? So just that doesn't happen a lot. It doesn't make sense to give you a bunch with no solution if we're trying to get you to learn how to solve problems. Okay. So x equals -b plus or minus radical b squared minus 4ac divided by 2a. All right. -b, so that'd be -7 plus or minus the square root of 81 over 2 times -4. I'm plugging in the stuff I know. I know b is 7, so -b is the opposite of that. So that's -7 plus or minus the square root of 81. I got that from over here where I did the discriminant. That's always what's going to go underneath the square root is your discriminant. And then on the bottom, 2 times a was -4 for me. Okay? And hey, -b. b is 7. So the opposite of +7 is -7. So that's where the negative comes from. That -b means the opposite of whatever b is. That's it. We just say it -b, but it means the opposite. That's exactly right. That's exactly right. Okay. Good question. I will clear that up. All right, now let's simplify that if we can. Does 81 have a good square root? It's 9. That's nice. So it's -7 plus or minus 9 over 2 times -4, -8. Okay? I'm going to split that apart because I know I can add and subtract 9 from -7. Right? Because I can do that math because that's a regular number now. -7 plus 9 over -8. -7 minus 9 over -8. And I'm going to simplify those 2 fractions. So that's going to be 2 over -8, which is what? -1/4. There's an answer. And this is going to be -16 over -8, which is positive or -2? Why? That's right. Because they're both negative. Yeah, -16 divided by -8 is a +2. Good job. So we got our 2 answers, 2 real solutions. The square root worked out, so that's why we end up with regular numbers. If the square root doesn't work out, you don't end up with regular numbers. Any questions about that one? All right, let's look at another one. 2 more to go. Okay, this one and one more. And we'll do some practice. It'll be about lunchtime by then anyway. All right, so let's look at one that we could do by square roots, but let's practice doing it by quadratic formula. So let's say we had something like this: x squared plus 5x minus 10 is equal to 5x. It doesn't equal 0. So what's the shortest route to get it equal to 0? Subtract this 5x away. But when I subtract 5x minus 5x, what happens to those pieces? They're gone. They cancel each other out, right? So I end up with just x squared minus 10 is equal to 0. And that looks like one we had just finished doing yesterday with the solving by square roots. But I want to practice this with quadratic formula just to get us more practice with quadratic formula, because you're going to use it a lot after you leave my class. This quadratic formula is going to be used a lot. So this one, let's go ahead and do the discriminant and solve it by quadratic formula. So we need to know what A, B, and C are. What's A? 1. That's what's in front of x squared. And B would be, no, 0, because B is always in front of what? Plain x. Is there a plain x in that problem? No, so that's why B is 0. And then C would be -10. That missing piece is a 0. Be careful of that. And so the discriminant, b squared minus 4ac. Again, if you write this as many times as I have today, you'll have it memorized. So b is 0 squared minus 4 times 1 times -10. Well, that's an easy math problem. What's 0 squared? -4 times 1 is -4. -4 times -10 is negative times negative is +40. 0 plus 40 is 40. That's my discriminant. It's positive, so I have 2 real solutions again. Again, that's the most common thing. That's what we see the most. And then we're going to work that out. -b plus or minus equal b squared minus 4ac divided by 2a. Okay. Plug in the things we know. What do we know about b? It's 0, so negative b would still be 0. There's no such thing as -0. 0 is in between negative and positive, so it doesn't change signs. And then the square root of 40, and then 2 times 1 on the bottom. So does 40 have a nice square root? No, 10 square root of 10 is the square root of 100. But we could simplify 40 as 4 times 10. Maybe that's what you're thinking. And then 2 and 2, and then 10 is 5 and 2. There's a pair of 2's, right? So that means what comes outside of the radical? 2, and then 10 stays inside. 2 times 1 is 2. Now here's what can happen with this particular problem. Look at these numbers in the front, 2 and 2. They're both positive. They both can be divided by 2, right? So that'd be plus or minus 1 square root of 10. Technically, that's over 1. But that's our answer. Positive and negative square root of 10. If we had done that problem by square roots, like we did yesterday, we would have added 10 and got x squared is equal to 10, and then took the square root of both sides. What do you know the answer is? Plus or minus the square root of 10. Same as we got with quadratic formula. You get the same answer, no matter which way you do it. Now that's shorter, right? That's why we learned that method, because when the problem is short enough to do it, it's quicker. And we're always looking for a quicker way. But understand that quadratic formula still gets the same answers. And if we did factoring on some of the other ones that we've done, that we would have gotten the same answers. I don't know if factoring is that much quicker than quadratic formula. Depends on if you know your numbers or not. Okay, let's do one more problem. x squared minus 6x plus 12 is equal to 0. Yeah, all right, so it's equal to 0. I don't have to do anything to make this work. So all I'm going to do is I'm going to do the discriminant. And I got to know what A, B, and C are. What's A? 1, C, B, -6. And then C would be 12. Be careful on the signs. Don't drop that minus sign that's in front of anything. It will give you a completely different answer. Okay? So B squared minus 4AC. So -6 squared minus 4 times 1 times 12. What's -6 squared? Positive 36. Squaring is -6 times -6. And then -4 times 1 is -4 times 12 is 48. So it's a minus 48. Because that's still negative. -4 times negative or times positive 12 is -48. We got 36 minus 48. -12. Okay, so there's my discriminant. What do we know about a negative discriminant? No real solutions. And we're done. We don't have to do the other part. Okay? That's nice. And get to algebra 2, you will have to do the other part. But you're in algebra 1 now, so we'll stick with that. All right? We're done with that part. All right. Now let's do a little practice. All right, so on this practice, I want you to do the same thing. I want you to find the discriminant first and then solve it. If it's got answers. It is. It's a formula. Formulas are always nice. I always thought math classes when you had a formula was nice because all you have to do is put the numbers in the right spot. Turns out that's a little more difficult for folks than I thought it would.